Good morning, everybody. Today, on 11th August, Department of Geology of Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel Cluster University organized the national webinar on the theme Awareness about Genomics and Metagenomics. Honorable Vice Chancellor Professor C.L. Chandan Sir was the chief guest. In his address, he encouraged the students to participate in such webinars and to develop the scientific attitude. Dr. Tulika, Associate Professor IIT Mandi, was the speaker and she gave the presentation on the topic System Analysis of Genomes from Simple to Complex in a very simplified and beautiful way. Dr. Sanjay Narang and Dr. Radhika Jamwal coordinated the program in a very successful way. About 90 students and delegates from various states joined the webinar. So here are some glimpses of the webinar. Thank you.
I welcome all my friends, delegates, and all students from different parts of the state of India. Corona and lockdown has teaches us a lot of lessons, and the webinar are the product of technology for sharing our thought innovations, which has reduced the distance virtually, resulting in the exchange of ideas, culture, language, and mutual interactions. मैं आज के हमारे मुख्य वक्ता डॉक्टर तुलिका श्रीवास्तव, एसोसिएट प्रोफेसर आईआईटी मंडी का अपने विश्वविद्यालय परिवार की तरफ से आपका हार्दिक स्वागत और अभिनंदन करता हूं। हमारे आज के मुख्य अतिथि महोदय परम श्रद्धेय प्रोफेसर सीएल चंदन जी हमारे साथ ऑनलाइन जुड़ चुके हैं। मैं उनका अपने तहे दिल से स्वागत, धन्यवाद और अभिनंदन करता हूं। श्रीमान, मैं इस राष्ट्रीय संगोष्ठी में आपका हार्दिक स्वागत और अभिनंदन करता हूं। सर, आई टेक योर permission to start this webinar.
Please start the seminar.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for providing valuable inputs for this seminar. अब मैं आमंत्रित करना चाहूँगा डॉक्टर राधिका जम्बाल जी को to formally proceed for the further process. Dr. Radhika Jambal ji.
Hello, am I audible?
Yes, you are audible. Please continue.
Okay, ma'am. Okay. Good morning to each one of you present in today's session. It gives me an immense pleasure in welcoming all of you in national webinar entitled System Analysis of Microbial Genomes, organized by Department of Zoology, Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel Cluster University, Mandi, Himachal Pradesh. Sardar Government University, established in the year 2018. This university is a teaching, affiliating, and research university. It has its office located in Vallabh Government College, Mandi. The university consists of 4 constituent colleges. Vallabh Government College, Mandi, is the lead college of the university. Apart from this, Government College Basa, Government College Narla, and MLSM College Sundarnagar are other constituent colleges. The construction work of buildings of the university is on progress in all the 4 campuses of the university. Currently, first batch of MSc Botany, Zoology, Chemistry, Physics, Management and MA History are running. They are being housed in the Mandap created with the objective of improving the quality of education and increasing the access and equity in higher education. So with permission of chair, it is a moment of extreme pleasure to welcome the guests who are present in this webinar. Honorable Vice Chancellor, Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel Cluster University Mandi, Professor C.L. Chandanji, renowned keynote speaker of the event, Dr. Tulika Srivastava, Dean of Academic Affairs, Dr. Deepak Pathania, Dean of Student Welfare, Dr. Yashwant Gupta, Dean of Life Sciences, Dr. Monica Panchani, who is also HOD of the department, Dr. Jyoti Gupta, HOD of Botany, Dr. Sanjay Narang, coordinator of the event, fellow colleagues, delegates across India, and dear students. I, Dr. Radhika Jamwal, on behalf of Department of Zoology, welcome you all in this national webinar. We are honored to have you all with us. Before we start the session, I want to chant a small mantra, that is Astu Ma Sadgamya, Tamso Ma Jyotirgamya, Mittu Mamartam Gamya. That is, lead us from unreal to the real, lead us from darkness to the light, and lead us from death to the immortality. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. First of all, I would like to welcome Dr. Professor C.L. Chandanji, Vice Chancellor of CL Cluster University. And on that note, I am profoundly delighted to take an opportunity to introduce and welcome the chief guest of the event, Professor C.L. Chandanji, Honorable Vice Chancellor of Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel Cluster University, Mandi, Himachal Pradesh. Sir has completed his education from Himachal Pradesh University, Shimla, and also started his career at HPU Shimla as assistant professor, and thereby serving as professor for 14 years. He held various reputed positions such as Director of Business School, Dean of Studies, Dean of Student Welfare, and President of Teacher Association. He has guided 25 PhD students and also published 30 research papers in national and international reputed journals. He has been keynote speaker in many national and international conferences, resource person in Academic Staff College, Shimla, Punjab, Kurukshetra, and in National Academy for Audit and Accounts. He is also the founding editor of Shimla Management Journal and proudly founding Vice Chancellor of Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel Cluster University. Now, I request Honorable VC Sir to address the gathering and cast light of his knowledge upon us. Over to you, VC Sir, and welcome again.
Good morning to all the delegates in the conference. First of all, I'd like to welcome and express my deep sense of gratitude to Professor Tulika Srivastava for agreeing and sparing her valuable time for sharing his immense and vast knowledge with the teachers and the students of Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel University, Mandi. And at the outset, I will also like to compliment and congratulate the Dean of Life Sciences, Dr. Monica, Dr. Sanjay Narang, Dr. Radhika Jambal, and other faculty members who took efforts to organize this conference. So, first of all, I'll start with the caveat that I'm not a man of sciences. My basic discipline is management. So, I'm illiterate as far as the zoology and other life sciences are concerned. And the viruses are a very bad thing for us. Sometimes back I was reading an article about a virus which is called phages. All of you must have heard about that. That was a new thing to me. So I would like to share that. In Ganges water, Ganga river water, there is a virus which is called phages. So this virus was discovered by a certain scientist of Dr. Reddy's lab, and they started working on this virus. Because this virus is a virus which destroys or eats bacteria. And that precisely is the reason that the water of Ganga river, that always remains clean. It is not, it doesn't degenerate even if it is stored for a long period of time. So with the discovery of this virus, phages, this company is producing many medicines based on this virus, and many skin diseases which had become totally resistant to all the drugs available, they are now curable with the help of the medicine which is produced out of this phages virus. So my message to the conference and to the students and the teachers who are participating, that this is a very exciting field of research, and if India wants to become a global economic and superpower, then research into genome sequencing of viruses, bacteria, microbes, and human, that is very essential. Now, merely research into R&D of the defense equipment or atomic research will not protect the country. No, because now is the age of biological warfare. So if we are not prepared with the proper research for facing such attacks from enemy countries, then our country is not a safe place. So I congratulate all the organizers, and I call upon all the researchers to work in this field and contribute their best for making India a world power. Thank you so much. And at the end, I once again express my deep sense of obligation and gratitude to Dr. Tulika Srivastava for becoming a resource person in this conference and sharing her invaluable knowledge with all the teachers and the students. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, sir, for giving insights about the topic and present scenario.
As we having the students of MSc level, and they have already studied the cell biology, genetics, etc. in their course. So I will start from the cell biology. So as you know that we having the cell, and we study the structure and composition and different functions of cell in cell biology. And in a cell, in every cell, there is a presence of nucleus. And inside the nucleus, you can see there are the presence of chromosomes. And in the chromosomes, you can find the structure of DNA. This is a structure of DNA. And DNA, you can see that there are the sequence of DNA on each single chromosome. So when we are focusing on the cell, that is related to the cell biology, then coming to the nucleus, coming to the chromosomal part, coming to the heredity, means how the characters are transmitted from one generation to next generation. that is the genetics. So genetics is the study of heredity. So whatever we are getting in the next generation, that is from the previous generation. So genes are the genes which carry the information for forming any other kind of the protein or any structure. So then genomics, what do you understand by genomics? Genomics is the study of all of a person's genome. It's the total genome within the interaction of those genes and with the environment, person's environment. So that is the genomics. So let us understand it in a very simpler way. You have already studied about the central dogma that inside, now coming to the cell biology, and I am focusing on the DNA, chromosome. So DNA will change into RNA. So this process is named as a transcription. So you can see the zoology students and the faculty of zoology, they can understand, but it is easier to understand for other members from different field. So DNA will change into RNA. RNA will change into protein. So this process is transcription and translation. Then protein is just the expression. So you know that in case of human, there are 23 pairs of chromosomes in our nucleus, and there are the genes which just express themselves. And these genes which express themselves in the form of proteins, and later on they form the organs and tissues, as well as control the chemical reactions and carry the signals between the cells. So this is all about the genetic information, how the genetic information that is carried from the cell, from the nucleus to the cytoplasm, and how the DNA will change into RNA, or RNA will change into protein, and that is going to form the trait. So it means genome. But do you understand by genome? So genome means an organism's complete set of DNA, a complete set of DNA, which includes all of its genes. So you can see the structure of chromosomes, and then you can see the nucleotides here, and all of them, they are forming the genome. So virtually every single cell of human body, it contains the 3 million of DNA base pairs. So we can, because after the sequencing, we come to know that we having the 3 billion DNA base pairs. Whereas genetics, what happens in genetics? Genetics refers to the study of individual genes as well as their roles in inheritance. So inheritance means genetics. And when we are talking of about the whole of the genome, then it is the genomics. So it means genomics is the sub-discipline of genetics. That is devoted, means we can just apply it in gene mapping. You have understood. You can just go to the linkage group, crossing over, mapping, sequencing, functional analysis. So it involves the study of all the genes, DNA, RNA, proteome, as well as at the cellular level, as well as the tissue level. So genomics means it aims at the collective characterization and quantification of genes. So it also involves the sequencing, and with the help of genomics, we can just assemble and analyze the entire genome with the help of tools. That is the bioinformatics. So this is a bioinformatics is a new science through which we can sequence the DNA. So you can see here the DNA and how it is sequenced to form the different genes. So genomic, why we are doing the research on the genomics? Because these can be applied in the human, in the diagnostic of different disease, and in the treatment, and in the improvement of crop for food and fuel production. So knowledge of complete genome sequence of any organism, that is important for understanding the functions and individual genes and their networks. So for defining evolutionary relationship also, for studying the systematic also, and for also relieving some kind of unknown regulatory mechanism. Otherwise, without the genomics, we can't understand what is going to be metabolic relationship of these genes, or what is going to be expressed by these genes. So then comes to the genome. In case of genomics, when we focus on the microbial sequencing, when we focus on the microbes, then it becomes the microbial genomics. So microbes, you know, in our planet, there are so many microbes, and they are present in everywhere. So including some of them are present in extreme locations on the earth also. So why we are focusing on the microbes today? Because microbes possess the genome which are much smaller as compared to the genomes of plants and animals. So which makes them ideal for genetic and physiological study. That's why we are focusing on the sequencing of the microbes also, because they are also causing some, they are also behaving as pathogens. So microbial genomics is an interdisciplinary field of science that is focusing on structure, function, evolution, mapping, and editing of genes. So the main focus of research is now on microbial genomics. So it is widely variable and reflect the enormous diversity of bacteria, archaea, and lower eukaryotes. You can understand all these terms. So generally plant-associated microbes, they play very critical role in agriculture and food safety and security in the maintenance of ecosystem balances. And some of these diverse microbes, such as viruses, bacteria, they cause up plant diseases. While it's not always that they are harmful, they may be just enhance the plant growth also. So about 6% of the microbes have been sequenced, in which are all plant associated microbes. So there is very importance of microbial genomics, because we can understand the basic biological process, we can understand the host pathogen interaction, we can understand the protein interaction. So we can just use those microbial genomics in the forensic analysis, in the design of novel antimicrobial compounds also. So in broad applications, every sector covers the applications of microbial genomics. So for ensuring the safety of food supply, for maintaining human health, for countering the spread of disease, and for the protection of the environment. So what do you understand by meta genomics? So you are I am just focusing on the microbial. Microbial means which are the microbes, which are very small, tiny living materials. Then when whole of the genetic sequence of microbes which are uncultured, sometimes we are not able to culture them, we are not able to extract the whole of the sample from the environment. So we just take the sample from the environment, and that study is named as the metagenomics. So the genetic material that can be recovered directly from the environmental samples, so that is also named as environmental genomics. So the term metagenomics, it was first used by the Handelsman. So metagenomic analysis, it is used for pathogen detection, for the from the sample of blood, cerebrospinal fluid, microbiome research, ecological and environmental studies investigation from uncultured and from the difficult sources. So availability of genomic and proteomic data. This kind of studies, we are getting the genomics, we are getting the proteomics, we are doing it with the help of the bioinformatics and biochemical tools. So these, with the help of these tools, we can control the genetics. So we can manipulate the existing microbes. So these are very helpful in the diagnosis of some kind of disease and in the treatment of some kind of disease. So today's lecture is on system approach to decipher the role of simple microbial genomes and complex metagenomes, and then their collection of microbial genomes in the gut environment.
Thank you, Dr. Monica, for giving the brief introduction of the topic. Now, without any further delay, I would like to introduce the renowned keynote speaker of today's session, that is Dr. Tulika P. Srivastava. Dr. Tulika is working as an associate professor in the School of Basic Sciences, IIT Mandi, since 2017. She joined IIT Mandi in 2012 as assistant professor with specialization in bioinformatics and NGS applications. Dr. Srivastava completed her master's in chemistry from IIT Kanpur. During her stay at IIT Kanpur, she developed a lot of interest in computer sciences and biology. Thereafter, she pursued her PhD in bioinformatics from IGIB Delhi and completed in 2006. Then she joined RIKEN, Japan, as postdoctoral researcher and worked as a research scientist for a period of 6 years till 2012. Her broad area of research includes system biology, and multi-OMICS applications for health and environment. Other areas of her research include metagenomics, metabiomes, algorithms, and tools development for next generation sequencing, computation biology, and comparative analysis. I am extremely delighted to call upon Dr. Tulika. Over to you, Dr. Tulika, ma'am.
Thank you so much, Dr. Radhika. First of all, let me just share my screen. Morning, Honorable VC Sir, Professor C.L. Chandanji, and other dignitaries. I first of all extend my greatest thanks to the team from Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel Cluster University, Mandi, Dr. Monica Panchani, Dr. Sanjay Narang, and Dr. Radhika Jambal, who visited IIT Mandi a few days ago, and they met me to discuss our possible collaborations and interactions in the coming times at this time also. And I am extremely delighted today that they organized this conference, and I am very thankful to Professor C. Chandanji to take out time from his busy schedule and attend this event personally. Thank you so much, sir. And although Professor Chandan mentioned that he's from a management background, but I am surprised he gave such a beautiful introduction to the topic. Difficult for me to believe that he's actually from management background. So, sir, I'm really highly impressed by that. So, thank you so much, sir, for that introduction. And you correctly mentioned that India did lag behind in some of the initial efforts towards human genome sequencing, which got completed back in 2000 and 2003. That was the time I started my PhD, in fact, year 2000. And but ever since then, India has been playing quite a bit of important role. And as you rightly mentioned, in this COVID era, particularly, how much contribution our country has made. So that is pretty evident. So some of these advancements which have taken place, they have been possible because of the developments of this next generation sequencing technologies, because in order to understand COVID, like we know what kind of strain is coming, so NGS plays a very important role there. And I'm fortunate that I got a chance to work in this area of this NGS experiments as well as the technology. And then also Dr. Monica has very beautifully introduced the topic, which has made my work simpler. And so I think I'll move on to my talk, my lecture now. So as the topic says, it is systems analysis of microbial genomes from simple to complex. So what I'm intending to do here is, this is not to scare you, as I understand the majority of the audience that we have here are MSc students and a variety of faculty from the discipline of zoology, botany, life sciences. So I have tried to keep my talk simple, but I would encourage any interaction, any questions if you have, then please do let me know. We can do it whenever we are, I have completely explained the topic to you. So if I just briefly mention about the topic. So what I'm going to do today is, I'm going to show you that by simple, I mean the simple microbial genomes, and by complex, I mean that the way they live in an environment and have their interactions among themselves, which is a complex environment. So a microbial genome in an isolation, a single cell, if you just take cell of a microbe, it's a simple thing, simple entity. But whenever they come together, you know, like in a society of microbes, which is actually what metagenome is, a microbiome is. So that's where their interactions among themselves and with the host in which they are occurring. So these things become very important, and they require specific investigations and specific technologies to address them. So I'm going to discuss some of those in the talk. So I'm sure this is not new to you, but this is our campus, a snapshot of our campus. Mandi is a beautiful place. I am so honored to be here for the past 9 years. I'm staying in Mandi, 9.5 years. And I think we really enjoyed our stay back in the campus in Mandi also, which I understand is currently used by your university. So it was a very healthy and happy experience. So this is our campus, but I invite all of you to visit the campus as soon as you get a chance. And I look forward that we are able to have many students here in the campus for more open house and personal interaction. As soon as the COVID situation will improve a little bit, I will be very willing to participate in that activity and invite the group from the cluster university to visit. So, and this is the BioX Center building as of now. So we are occupying this first floor of the BioX Center building and the ground floor at the moment. And I'll show you some of the research themes at BioX that are undergoing. So we are working on disease prevention and affordable healthcare, including my colleagues. This is not just my research. This is at the center wherein we have close to about 15 different colleagues working in life sciences or other engineering disciplines. So we are all working together towards these research themes. Then we have agricultural practices with respect to the Himalayan region, and then environment and Himalayan biodiversity exploration. So these are the main areas of research that are going on in the center. These are some of the facilities that we have been able to put together. We have the basic cell and tissue culture facilities, both for microbial as well as animal cell cultures. Then we have the fungal culture facility, and we have a very state-of-the-art next generation sequencing facility, which is the key facility that has been used in this work that I'm going to present today. So we have two different types of NGS machines which are used for DNA or RNA sequencing. Then we have the gas chromatography mass spec, the bioreactors, flow cytometers, simple spectrophotometers like UV, Vis NIR, fluorescence microscope, stop flow machines to measure protein kinetics, and the basic molecular biology labs. Then we have other lab like the systems biology lab, wherein the students are sitting and working towards accessing the high performance computing, because the work that is particularly required with NGS data analysis involves use of high performance computing. So that is what is being done here. Then we have the plant growth lab, medicinal plant garden, botanical garden, herbariums, and the animal house facility is going to come up. And to support this research, our research, we have the Advanced Material Research Center, AMRC, which is equipped with most of the high-end facility like NMR, mass spec, single crystal XRD, confocal microscope, and a lot more, which kind of assists us in the research. And we also have the high-performance computing facility at IIT Mandi, as I already mentioned. It is very crucial to the research here. Now, although Dr. Monica has already explained the central dogma of molecular biology to you, I'm going to use this in a different concept, that just to introduce you to the multi-omics part. So what is multi-omics? Okay, so as she mentioned, like we have the DNA going to RNA, which is done by the process of transcription, and then RNA to protein, which is done by the process of translation. Now, if you want to study the DNA, so that we study using the field which is known as genomics. So it's a type of omics. And now when we have a collection of genomes, as I mentioned, then that forms a metagenome. In an environment, we have a collection of organisms living together. So that is a metagenomic environment or a microbiome environment. So in the field that is used to probe into these microbiome or environmental samples, that is known as metagenomics. And then if you want to study the RNA, then we have the transcriptomics or metatranscriptomics. Again, transcriptomics is coming from the single entity, and the metatranscriptomics is coming from a complex environment of multiple organisms. And then currently also we are pursuing some research on natural rubber degrading microbes in isolation plus in consortia mode, and then the bifidobacteria, for example, the probiotic organism. So I'm going to talk about this part, the probiotic part, today with you in more details. The other area where I have been using these multi-omics approach is to understand the systems biology of the health and the disease state. So if I just define a system of interaction of host with the microbe, so for example, gut environment if we take, or the human. So the human, as we know, has several occasions where we interact with the microbial cells. Like in our gut, there are a lot microbial cells living, on our skin, lot of microbial cells living. So likewise on our body, there are many places where microbes are residing. In fact, you will be surprised to know that the number of microbial cells that are present on a single human body is almost equivalent to the number of human cells that we are made up of. So that many number of microbes we are carrying on our body, and they all have very important roles. So they of course interact with each other through this crosstalk. So what I'm trying to understand is, for example, which bacteria and their genes are involved in this kind of interaction with the host, then which genes of the host are involved in interaction and respond to the bacterial signals, if there are any, and what components in diet, for example, these are the external factors, I would say, like if you know that we eat something and then there is an effect, okay? So that what components of the external factors, so the environmental factors in the form of diets that have the effect on overall physiology, okay? So this is what I'm trying to understand. And of course, we also look at bacterial metabolites and cell components along with collaboration with other colleagues. But these are the areas that we are working on. And so far, we've been able to work on some interesting projects for metagenomics in human gut. Some of the papers we've been able to publish. I'll talk about one of this later. And then the mice gut, we are already working on some of the works like knockout mice and understanding its microbiome. What happens due to the knockout, what is the effect of the knockout that we generate on the microbiome? I'll explain that. And then some of the like fiber supplementation, how does the microbiome react to it? Okay. And then we are also looking at some identification of disease biomarkers within this milieu, I would say, using the fields of transcriptomics and epigenomics, but I'll not be talking about those today. Okay. So I would just like to mention here that although microbial world is considered as a very different world than the human world, but that's not totally true, because microbes play so important role in the human health that it's like there is always, the important balance has to always be there. As soon as there is an imbalance in the microbial population or composition, that is definitely manifested in the form of a disease. Okay, so microbes play that much important role, and I'm going to show you certain examples of that in my talk today. Now, the question is, why metagenomics? Although some part of it, Dr. Monica has already explained to you about, but I would like to bring your attention to the fact that you take these complex environments like we have ocean, we have whale falls, we have soil, we have human gut. Now, these are some of the environments which are like open environment, and soil is in fact a very dry environment. They all contain microbes, and human is a more of a closed system for microbes. But the microbes exist everywhere, okay? And as I mentioned, they do not exist in isolation, but they exist in a society, okay? And in this society, just like we talk to our neighbors and sometimes we take their help for some other thing, or we help them. So in the same way, microbes are also talking to each other. They are sometimes helping each other, or they are taking help from the others, or they are also taking help from the host, or they are helping the host. So in this way, like microbes are also living in a very complex environments, okay? They can have like this sea, if they are existing in the water in a very diluted form, yet they are interacting somehow. Then we have a soil, they are existing in a dry environment and interacting. In gut is a very, very, I would say, harsh environment for microbes, yet microbes are living together. Okay, so that's how they are living in a very complex environment. But you will be surprised to know that more than 98% of the bacteria that exist on this planet Earth, they remain uncultured by the traditional methods. Simply because you see, these are so complex environments, it is very difficult to mimic the exact condition for culturing these microbes in the lab. Say, for example, I'll give you an example of SFB, segmented filamentous bacteria. We worked on, it's unculturable actually. So we worked on this microbe and to understand its genome, what is its genome looks like. And it is unculturable. We wanted to understand why is it unculturable? Why can't we culture it in the lab? It is so important that only this particular SFB is responsible for the induction of Th17 cells in our gut. Okay, not any other, not even the similar bacteria to SFB, which are Clostridia. They are also not able to induct this Th17 cell differentiation. Only SFB is able to do so. So then the question is how it was able to do so, and then why it was doing so. So that's what, in order to understand some of these questions, the genomic analysis we undertook. And at the same time, we also tried to see whether we are able to grow it in the lab. We tried that. Eventually, it turned out that the microbe actually requires to associate itself to the intestine in such a manner, and that is important for its growth. Right, so that you understand, it is such a complex thing that it is very difficult to create that environment in the lab, and that's why they remain uncultured. So the question is how we can still know about them, because they are all very important to know. So this metagenomics field has evolved, and which is a new science, I would say, which is actually a culture independent cloning and analysis of microbial DNA, which is directly extracted from the environmental samples. Okay, so of course, most microbial samples microbes live in a complex environments, and so instead of sequencing one genome at a time, in this field of metagenomics, we harvest the complete DNA from the environment and sequence all of them at the same time. But it has got its own challenges. Okay, and of course, it's very important to understand the systems biology of the system. And there are several applications of metagenomics. You name the field, like environmental studies. I'm not going to present the environmental aspect of the application of metagenomics today, maybe some other time, but we are working on that as well. So environmental studies, then human health, then identification of novel microbes, biodegradations, energy generations, and a lot of other immense biotechnological and industrial implementations are there. So they are very important. These metagenomics, the microbes that are living in our environment, they are very important and required to be understood. Now, the most favored technology that is used to study these microbes is, of course, the sequencing technology. Ever since these are the list of certain sequencers which have been available, like Sanger, Ion Torrent, Roche, Illumina, PacBio, Nanopore, these are the third generation sequencers, and the technology is developing only. As you can see this small graph here, the way it is growing, you can see this exponential growth in the past about 10 years, 10 to 15 years. And so the number of sequences that we've been able to generate out of these sequencers is actually growing. And at present, we are able to generate some 4 to 6 terabytes. It's huge, of raw data per day. So NovaSeq, which is actually the highest version of Illumina sequencer that is available at the moment in the markets, is able to generate close to 4 to 6 terabytes of raw data per day. And when we analyze this data, it is like it grows exponentially. So you can consider the scale of data that is generated out of it, and it is a huge challenge for people like me and who are working in this field of computational analysis plus NGS data generation. Storage is an issue, data generation is an issue, then analysis is an issue. So these kind of challenges we have, and in my lab we are focusing on developing some of the sophisticated tools for the purpose of analyzing such complex metagenomic data sets and other omic data sets. Now, just to give you a snapshot between how the metagenomics differ from the traditional genomics, as I said. So in the case of traditional genomics, what you will do, you will take an environment, you will try to culture the microbes living in there, you isolate one colony and you take one cell and isolate the DNA from there and do the sequencing. But whereas, as I mentioned, since a large majority of this environment of microbes are not culturable, so when I look at these reads, I know they are coming only from one organism. Okay, but in the case of metagenomic, what will happen? I told you I'm taking the DNA directly from this sample, which means if there are 500 different microbes living in there, I will have a mix of the DNA of all 500 into my sample. So when I sequence, I will get a mix of those 500. Okay, and that's a very big challenge because we want to know from where they are coming. Okay, which microbe this particular read is coming from. You can consider it like this, that putting this metagenomic data is something like, so this is a simple puzzle. I don't know if you made a puzzle ever, picture puzzle like this, but if you have a simple puzzle with only few pieces, okay, and and all the pieces are present there, so you'll be able to put the picture together. But consider a situation where you have many millions of pieces, and with the difficulty that some of them may be missing. So that is one of the limitation of the next generation sequencing methods, that we, although we want to, but we cannot always target 100% of the genomics information. So that is one of the problems. So some are missing also. So how will you be able to construct this puzzle? It is very difficult, very challenging. You can, but it is very challenging. Okay, so this is the challenge that is actually faced by the metagenomic field. Nevertheless, scientists like me, many scientists around the world are working in this area. Now, I'll give you one more snapshot of how we see metagenome with respect to the human genome. Now, Professor Chandan mentioned in his talk that the human genome was sequenced back in around 2000 to 2003. The RAP genome came around 2000. And that resulted into the knowledge of that the host, that's a human, consists of close to 25,000 genes, 25 to 30,000 genes. So this is the size. You will be surprised to see that the human gut microbiome is of this order, just gut. I told you that on our body, there are many microbes living everywhere. I'm talking now about just the gut. So in the gut, we have 2 to 3 million genes, whereas in the host, how many genes are there? Only 25,000. But the gut typically has more than 160 different species of microbes living together at one particular time, contributing to 2 to 3 million genes. So they are all functioning, they are all doing something. Okay, so this is the scale that we are talking about. Yet we cannot survive without them, so they are very important. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit about the approaches that are used to study metagenomics. So metagenomics is basically broken into two kind of technologies. One is a targeted technology, and another one is a shotgun technology. So in the targeted metagenomics, so we have a complex environment of multiple microbes. So what we do, we target a particular gene. And the most preferred gene is the 16S ribosomal RNA, because we know it's conserved throughout the bacterial lineage, and it's a very convenient molecule. And so we make use of it. We amplify using the PCR method to access only the 16S ribosomal RNA genes. And then we sequence them. Okay, so this is one method, which is a targeted method. Now the other method is a shotgun method. So what we do in this method, we take the same environment, for example, and we are not amplifying anything. We are straight away going to sequence the complete environment here. So we directly take the environment, break it into small pieces, and do the sequencing. Okay. Now I'm going to talk about a little bit the other differences. So for example, here, in the targeted one, since you are only looking at the 16S ribosomal RNA, so that is able to help us in the phylogenetic or taxonomic composition analysis, understanding of the environment. So we can know who is there, which microbes are there, how many firmicutes are there, how many bacteroides are there, how many proteobacteria are there, how many gamma proteobacteria are there. So those kind of studies we can do. We can understand the diversity. Okay, diversity of the organism, of the environment. But in the case of complete shotgun method, because now remember why we are able to do it, we are only targeting the 16S gene here, whereas in the case of complete environment, what we are targeting is a complete DNA, not just one particular gene. So complete DNA we are targeting. That means we can also know what they are doing. We can access their functions. So we can know who is there. The taxonomic analysis we can do, but at the same time, we can also do the functional analysis. Okay, that what all are they doing? Then using these functions, we can build up their pathways, we can build up their metabolic capabilities. All those things we can understand. Okay, I'm going to give you examples of both the approaches today in a short while. All right. So, and yes, this is a brief introduction of why we choose the 16S ribosomal RNA. chemicals never present in all. And the kind of structure this gene contains is like this. It has got some unspecific regions, and which are these green regions are more conserved regions, and the gray regions, V1, V2, V3 that you're seeing, these are more variable regions. So these variable regions are they help us to basically distinguish the organisms based on the taxonomy. Okay, so that's why it is one of the most preferred taxonomic biomarker, although there are others also, but this is the most preferred one. Now, there are some other advantages and disadvantages of both the methods. For the targeted one, the 16S amplicon-based method, it has a great depth. That is one advantage. It's more precise, but we have to only sequence one specific region, like 16S rRNA in the case of bacteria, 18S in fungi, etc. But it has got, and on the other hand, in the shotgun method, the advantages are you can theoretically sequence 100% of the sample. We can, okay. Then there is a greater resolution to genetic content. Okay, we can also access the function. That's the biggest advantage. And then we can identify novel organisms as well. But there are also some limitations of both the methods. Like if we take the targeted method, then amplification can be an issue at times. And the biggest disadvantage is we can access only the species or subspecies identification. It's not possible. We can only go up to the genus identification with greater confidence. Whereas in the case of shotgun method, we rarely sequence everything. As I said, the method itself has got its own disadvantage. Although we target 100%, but we are not able to do it. And there is not as much depth that we are able to see. Okay, and plus it is very expensive. The biggest problem, it is very expensive and complex as compared to the targeted method. So depending upon the situation, we take a decision which one to use, but we both are used routinely. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about the most influential projects globally that have been there, like this Earth Microbiome Project. So this Earth Microbiome Project is a huge effort to explore the microbial community, okay, in the existing on our planet Earth. So because as I said, we know only less than 1% of the microbes. So what scientists are venturing into, they are trying to explore the extreme environments you can see. Okay, most cold environment to the different type of lakes, to different type of soil, desert or rich soil, or so different type of environment, or acid drainage or sewage. So different type of environments people are trying to explore to collect data. They have already done this, in fact. So to collect data and understand, build a repository for the microbial population. Then another thing is that this MetaHit project. So this MetaHit project is again, it's very expensive actually. So 22 million euros have already been spent. This is a European-led project. And this involved the shotgun-based sequencing of individuals belonging to 8 countries. Okay, and then European countries basically, and then they sequence the gut microbiome, okay, of a human in order to understand the complete set of genes that are existing, and they identified that it has about 3.3 million genes that are coming from the gut microbiome of individuals. Okay, and then the HMP project, the Human Microbiome Project. So this is a US-led project, so it actually got over again, but this is targeting more diversity using the targeted based method, okay, the 16S ribosomal RNA based method. And using this method, again, people have been able to understand the diversity of the gut environment, and not just gut, but in fact, as you can see, the different sites in the body, like hair, nostrils, skin, vagina, oral cavity, esophagus, stomach, colon, all different sites have been explored, and their microbial, all these pie charts are actually showing you the composition of the microbiome of the different body sites. Okay, so that you can see. So this, and if I just take the gut, they have got immense roles. We know that microbes are involved in some synthesis of some important molecules for us. That they help. And we also know that the intestinal flora that is living in our gut that affects our health, they have important roles in immunity, vitamin synthesis, metabolism, obesity, inflammation. Now people have also linked it to autism, and we've been able to understand that they cross the gut-brain axis, and they've been able to link it to the brain-related disorders also. So and as I said, that as soon as, as long as this composition of the microbiome is intact, everything fine. But as soon as there is a dysbiosis, there is any change in the microbiome composition that leads to inflammation and then the disease. Okay, and so due to the effect, like what kind of diets that we supply to these microbes, they are affected by the environment or the neurodegenerative diseases. They cause neurodegenerative diseases or metabolism related diseases like obesity, insulin resistance, type 2 diabetes, and then the autoimmunity actually now is identified to be caused by the microbes also, like Crohn's disease and ulcerative colitis and even cancer. So some of many important diseases at this moment have been linked with microbes and diets. Okay. And so as I was telling that under a balanced condition, when you have a rich and balanced bacterial community, everything is fine. There is a normal immune system. And so everything is fine. But when there is a poor and unbalanced bacterial community, the interaction between the host cells and the microbial cells changes. And as a result, it leads to several pathologies like autoimmunity, allergies, metabolic disorders, or immune-related disorders. So this dysbiosis is actually found to be involved in many diseases. And one very important concept that has been actually seen nowadays is healthy gut versus the leaky gut. So what happens is that in the healthy environment, we have this intestinal epithelial layer, which is consisting of these tight junctions. And these tight junctions regulate the entry or exit of the metabolites through the intestinal epithelial layer. In the leaky gut, what happens? These tight junctions get disrupted. And as a result, the metabolite translocation is disrupted. Okay, and so sometimes even the microbes enter into the bloodstream and they transfer to various parts of our body and lead to disease. So, and in this case, these short chain fatty acids, they play a particular role because these keep these tight junctions intact, and thereby they prevent this breach of microbes. And these short chain fatty acids are produced in our body by the microbes that are living in our gut. So that's how they are very important. So the microbiome is, say for example, is primarily responsible for the production of these short chain fatty acids, which regulate the intestinal health by regulating the tight junctions. Okay, so that's why these to have a balanced microbiome is very important. Now coming to how to keep them balanced. So these probiotics is something, say for example, our gut bacteria, which are living good bacteria that are helping us. And these prebiotics, as what Dr. Monica has already introduced, are the food that this bacteria are feeding on. So the healthier food we give to our gut, the bacteria will feed upon it and healthy bacteria will grow. The population of bad bacteria will go down. Okay, so like for example, these prebiotics like inulins and fructans, they are absorbed by these gut microbiota, which are probiotics. So these prebiotics increase the probiotics like the bacteria and lactobacilli, which produce more short chain fatty acids as their fermentation end products. And when we have more short chain fatty acids, then they are actually leading to the colonic health. Okay, so this is what the relationship is there between the prebiotics and the probiotics and the intestinal health. I think I can skip this slide, but only thing that is important for you to understand is probiotics are the live organisms and prebiotics are the non-living, non-digestible food that probably we are eating, which is non-digestible to us. Okay, so this is what it is. Now I'll take you to some of the research that we have been doing using some of the technologies that we talked about. So back in 2007, when we had very limited knowledge about the microbiome, I was still week in Japan at that time. So that was the first venture of ours into this microbiome field. So we tried to target the healthy gut microbiome in Japanese individuals. So we took 13 Japanese individuals and we performed the shotgun-based sequencing of their microbiome. So we took their feces sample and shredded the fragments, isolated the microbial DNA, shredded it, created the library, performed the sequencing assembly and analysis. So and this set consisted of infants, adults, and members of same family. So we wanted to see what could be the effect of the diet in the same family, or how is the infant gut microbiome differs from the adult gut microbiome, because they all eat different food. So it was, as you can see, we could clearly identify that the adults were all gathering together in one cluster, whereas the infants were all, these are unweaned infants, they were all separating, and they were showing very different microbiome than the adult, of course, because the diet. Infants are on a different type of diet as compared to the adults. And so there was a drastic change that was happening during the weaning process. In addition to this, we also discovered, because there were a lot of functional analysis involved, we could look at the function of the microbiome in both adult and infant gut microbiome. So we saw that the adult gut microbiome was relatively uniform, yet more complex in function. So, but it was more stable, okay, to environmental changes. But the infant microbiome was very highly variable, but it was less complex, okay, and it was unstable and dynamic because it had to change. So as soon as the child becomes, say, 3 to 4 years old, at that age, you would see that there is a stabilization that starts to happen in the gut microbiome. And the second thing that I introduced, I already talked about SFB to you, that this is highly responsible for differentiation of TH17 cells in mice. So we undertook the sequencing. Again, this was unculturable, so we used the metagenomic resource here. We built the complete pathway reconstruction by taking the genes of this microbe, and we identified that this was living in a highly symbiotic manner with the host because it lacked the biosynthesis capacity of many of the important components that are required for the cell growth. And it was having a lot of transporters, like amino acid transporters, as you can see, some important sugar transporters, and also it was taking them from the host. And so then, as I said, this function we wanted to probe in more, this TH17 differentiation. So we identified that it has got this complete set of flagella formation. Now, it was known that the flagellants, they are the agonist of the TLR5 receptors. And these TLR5 receptors, they were responsible for this TH17 cell differentiation. But the way these flagellants actually interact with TLR5 receptor, they have a particular motive. So as you can see, this red one, these are the SFB, and they contain this motive for interaction with the TLR5, whereas the other Clostridia, which are present in our gut, but they are not able to do the induction of, lack this motive. Okay, so this clearly tells us why SFB is only able to do this, that TH17 cell differentiation. And then we also confirmed the expression of these flagellants in mouse SFB, and the study was published. Then another brief glimpse that I will give you is about one of the probiotic bacteria and the comparative genomics of this bacteria. This work was done by my PhD student Vikas, who was passed out. So bifidobacteria, as we know, the population of bifidobacteria kind of decreases over a period of time as we age. But it is one of the very important bacteria for our health, overall health. Okay. And so the members of this bacteria are known to be involved in the biosynthesis of many health-promoting molecules. Again, as I said, short-chain fatty acids, vitamins, etc. Okay, and so people have tried to probe the different species of bifidobacteria. So in this study, what we tried to do is we tried to understand. Now it is a probiotic, right? So what we tried to do, we will try to understand the factors, the functional factors that are responsible for the probiotic feature. Evolutionary analysis showed that the bifidobacteria is still growing. It itself is undergoing a lot of change because of the fact that it has got this open pangenome. Okay, so we performed a pangenome analysis, which it tells us that if we add another, say, if you see here, number of genomes, as we are adding number of genomes to it, this graph is number of gene families are increasing. Okay, now as soon as when it starts to plateau, okay, this graph starts to plateau, then we call that this is a closed pangenome. That is, addition of any new genome is not leading to any more changes. But in the case of bifidobacteria, that is not the case. It is still open. So new and new genomes are still evolving. Then another thing we looked at, but the core genes of the bifidobacteria, they were highly conserved. And most of the changes that are happening in the bifidobacterial genomes are outside the core. That was the main result that we observed from here. So we performed a selection pressure analysis, and we observed that this K by Ks omega value is less than 1. So which shows that the core is under a purifying selection, whereas other regions are more towards the positive selection. They are undergoing selection. So the core is not changing. The core genome, which is conserved across several bifidobacterial species that we took, that was not changing. Then we reconfirmed the position of bifidobacteria within the complete profile and using more robust method, which is the core proteome-based phylogeny, and we reconfirmed its position. Then we looked at that what functional classes were responsible for this, variation in the genome size, because as I said, it is still evolving. So there was a positive correlation with the genes like carbohydrate transport and metabolism, defense mechanism, transcription, and also then that means that, of course, it is a very important function. Carbohydrate transport and metabolism is one of the main function of bifidobacteria. So they are still acquiring genes related to this function, but they are somehow not trying to spot because they are showing a negative correlation for amino acid transport, etc., and cell wall, which are considered to be less important for them. Then we also looked at the genomic islands that, what kind of genes were laterally responsible for this genome size variation. So we found that the genes like replication, recombination, repair, cell wall, biogenesis, carbohydrate transport, again, they were all inherited. Okay, they were responsible for this genome growth. And then I was talking about these survival strategies and probiotic traits. So as you can see, these yellow things are the probiotic traits like fatty acid metabolism and SCFA production, polysaccharide utilization, and protein utilization for SCFA, short chain fatty acid production. So these are the main functions which are responsible for the probiotic traits in this bifidobacterial family. And then the survival strategies are some of these translational ribosomal structure biogenesis, transportation of essential molecules, iron acid homeostasis, efflux pumps. So they are all helping the bifidobacteria to live in harsh gut environments. And then we also looked at the relationship of this bifidobacteria with how it is interacting with the human host. So we identified certain genes which are showing interaction with the innate immunity of host. Okay, so this was the analysis which helped us to conclude that the bifidobacteria is has got certain functions which are helping it survival in the harsh gut environments, and certain other functions which are helping to exert its probiotic effect. Now, maybe after this talk, I'll just quickly brush through it and I'll stop after this. So this is a application of the other type of metagenomic approach that I mentioned, the shotgun-based method. So what it did here, we wanted to understand the effect of probiotic fructooligosaccharides and how it affects the gut microbiome function. So the idea is that the hypothesis was that this fructooligosaccharides FOS was able to affect the IgA production, secretory IgA, which limits the, which is one of the immune molecules, and it limits the bacterial association with epithelial cell surface. So what we did was we created we had the mice group of 3, and we feed them FOS, okay, and then we used 10-week-old mice, SPF mice, and they were fed with 5% FOS food for a week. And we collected the fecal samples every day from the 3 mice and performed the analysis, microbiome analysis, metagenomic analysis. So we took the fecal DNA, then we did the sequencing of the metagenomes from those fecal DNAs, and we did this analysis. So this is a complete pipeline for analysis. I can discuss that offline. But the main results were that, first of all, we identified that with FOS feeding on the different days, the IgA secretion was affected. So as you can see, when there was no FOS, the IgA levels were this. But after the FOS administration, the IgA levels were suddenly shoot up. And it also increased to day 2. And then kind of remained at that level, but still much higher than without FOS. And we observed significant differences between day 0 and day 2, of course, and 3 and 5 and 7. Okay, so we continued our analysis and we looked at what microbial species were mainly regulating on the different days, as you can see. So we identified that we have these bacteroids which were increased on day 1. Okay, and then we further observed that Enterohebdus and Faecalibaculum here, if you see, so Enterohebdus and Faecalibaculum, the green ones, they were low initially, but then they increased later on. Then Lactococcus was one which was reduced by day 7. And we have lactobacillus, which were oscillating. Okay, they were showing in sometime increase, sometime decrease, and likewise. So definitely, if FOS, as we are in the FOS, the microbial community was responding to it, was changing. Okay. Then what we did, we looked at the kind of species that were showing increase or decrease. So after FOS supplementation, what we observed is mainly the beneficial bacteria, which were highly responsible for short chain fatty acid production, they increased. So like we have this Bacteroides here, we have some Clostridium, and so these are the ones which actually showed an increase. And we looked at the details of all of these, and we saw that many of them, like these bacteroids, have a huge role in IgA production. It is known. Then again, the Clostridium, they have a role in IgA production. Fusobacterium again has some role in IgA production, and they were all showing increase. So then that's how over the other days also we continued to see that, and we saw that the microbes which were showing involvement in IgA production were increasing. And then we identified this that there was a clear-cut difference between the no phosphate group from the phosphate group, and the phosphate group where we are actually those mice to whom we were giving the phos, they were showing a positive correlation with the IgA secretion also. So definitely, as we are feeding the phos, IgA secretion is also increasing, and the microbial composition is actually shifting towards that. This is the main effect. So, and then we performed the detailed functional analysis, and we observed that the functions like information storage and processing, they were kind of reducing, and some other functions like over the time with phos metabolization, and this is at level 1. Then at level 2, we did the same, observed the same thing, that the important functions which were increasing at day 2 were carbohydrate transport and metabolism, here if you can see. And then further we wanted to see that how many different type of functions were changed. Actually not this slide, I'll tell you in this slide. So we wanted to see that how is the function changing with respect to phos. So now phos, when we take it, give it to the mice, it needs to get metabolized and microbes are doing this metabolization. That means the function in the microbes which are responsible for phos metabolization should show the variation. And that is exactly what we observe. These are the functions, microbial functions which are involved in phos metabolizations. As you can see, at day 2, all of them are increasing. At day 3, most of them are increasing. At day 5, again, some of them are increasing, but they've started to decrease. And at day 7, again, they are decreasing. So this told us that the phos metabolization was kind of showing a saturation over the next few days, even though we were giving them phos. Okay, so whatever increase that has to happen in the microbes which were metabolizing phos happened in the initial days, but on the later days, even though we were giving phos, the microbial functions were not changing too much. They were all remaining saturated. But then we looked at the genes associated with phos metabolization, and that's exactly the same thing that is showing that you are seeing here. At first it is increasing and then it is decreasing. And then we looked at the significant taxa. So we identified Bacteroides and Roseburia intestinalis, that most of the time these are the two microbial species that were found to be involved in phos metabolizations, like Cassie, Thetaito, Micron, Feingoldii, Ovetus, and Roseburia intestinalis. They were mainly responsible for this phos metabolization, and then they lead to the production of certain genes which are involved in short chain fatty acid production, like acetate, propionate, butyrate. They are taken up and they lead to the induction of B cell, then plasma cell, and production of IgA, and which eventually helps in reducing the pathogenic microbes. So this is a study, and it's actually under review at the moment in British Journal of Food. This is the last part, but I think I'll skip that due to the paucity of time. Yeah, but this is related to Ayurvedic Prakriti. So we did some analysis related to the 3 Prakriti groups, and we looked at the microbiome of healthy individuals who were classified based on these Prakriti groups, and we identified their differences in the microbial taxa. I will straight away move to the slide. Like, these are Prakriti specific signatures. In the case of Vata and Pitta, certain signatures were identified, and what their roles were. They were related to the Prakriti phenotype. Okay, so what we were observing. So, for example, in bath individuals, they show certain type of phenotype, and the functions that the bacteria were responsible for was correlating with that. So, these kind of studies and this work was also published, but I think due to the paucity of time, I'll not discuss that. And I would like to, in the end, acknowledge the support from DBT, MHRD, SERB, and IIT Mandi towards carrying out some of this research. Then my collaborators whose work has been presented here, mainly Professor Hattori, Dr. Todd Taylor, Professor Ono, a packetrik in Japan, Dr. Shinji Fukuda, Hidetoshi Morita, Yutaka Suzuki, and the Ayurveda work was done in collaboration with Dr. Mitali Mukherjee, Dr. Debashish Das, and Dr. Rajesh Pandey. And the students who had been involved in this work are mainly Vikas, Fazil, and Aditi. So with that, I thank you all. Once again, I thank Professor Chandan, the Honorable VC, for giving me this opportunity, and to the entire team of Cluster University for organizing this workshop. Thank you so much.
इस ऑनलाइन मंच पर उपस्थित सभी को मेरा शुभ दोपहर। परम श्रद्धेय माननीय कुलपति प्रोफेसर CL चंदन जी, वेबिनार के मुख्य अतिथि डॉक्टर तुलिका श्रीवास्तव जी, मुख्य वक्ता, और प्रतिगण, यहाँ पर सभी गणमान्य व्यक्तियों को धन्यवाद देना मेरे लिए एक सम्मान की बात है। जीव विज्ञान विभाग, सरदार वल्लभ भाई पटेल क्लस्टर विश्वविद्यालय मंडी, हिमाचल प्रदेश की ओर से मैं राष्ट्रीय वेबिनार की इस ऑनलाइन सभा में सभी लोगों का हार्दिक स्वागत और अभिनंदन करता हूं। मैं वेबिनार के सभी सम्मानित प्रतिनिधियों को उनकी उपस्थिति और वेबिनार को सफल बनाने में योगदान के लिए आभार व्यक्त करता हूं। मैं अपने माननीय मुख्य अतिथि कुलपति महोदय प्रोफेसर CL चंदन जी, जिन्होंने अपने व्यस्ततम कार्यक्रम से समय निकालकर कार्यक्रम की शोभा बढ़ाने और वेबिनार में अपने ज्ञान के शब्दों से हमें प्रेरित करने और प्रोत्साहित करने के लिए धन्यवाद अर्पित करता हूं। आपके समर्थन और प्रोत्साहन के लिए धन्यवाद सर, क्योंकि आपके अपने व्यस्ततम कार्यक्रम के बावजूद शिक्षण और शैक्षणिक मामलों में गहरी रुचि लेते हैं। डॉक्टर दीपक थानिया जी, अधिष्ठाता अध्ययन, डॉक्टर यशवंत गुप्ता जी, डीन स्टूडेंट वेलफेयर को उनके प्रोत्साहन के लिए धन्यवाद। मैं डॉक्टर मोनिका, विभागाध्यक्ष जीव विज्ञान विभाग और डीन लाइफ साइंसेज को कार्यक्रम आयोजित करने और कदम उठाने के लिए धन्यवाद देता हूं। डॉक्टर राधिका जम्बाल और विश्वविद्यालय के अन्य संकाय सदस्यों को उनके समर्थन के लिए धन्यवाद। हमारे मुख्य वक्ता डॉक्टर तुलिका श्रीवास्तव, एसोसिएट प्रोफेसर IIT मंडी को विशेष धन्यवाद, जिन्होंने हमारे निमंत्रण को स्वीकारा। सरल और अभिव्यंजक तरीके से माइक्रोबियल जीनोमिक्स पर अद्भुत प्रस्तुति देने के लिए बहुमूल्य समय और प्रतिबद्धता के लिए धन्यवाद। मैं यहाँ पर यह उल्लेख करना चाहता हूँ कि IIT मंडी और सरदार वल्लभ भाई क्लस्टर विश्वविद्यालय दोनों ने अपनी यात्रा वल्लभ गवर्नमेंट कॉलेज मंडी के एक ही भवन से शुरू की, जिनमें संबंध का बंधन है। इसलिए भविष्य के शोध और शैक्षणिक संभावनाओं की उम्मीद करता हूं। मैं विभिन्न राज्यों और यहां तक कि विदेश से आए सभी प्रतिष्ठित प्रतिनिधियों को उनकी सक्रिय भागीदारी के लिए धन्यवाद देता हूं। मैं आपकी सौम्य उपस्थिति के बिना यह कार्यक्रम सफल नहीं था। बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद। मैं सभी छात्रों को इस वेबिनार में अनुशासित तरीके से भाग लेने के लिए भी धन्यवाद देता हूं। आशा है कि आप सभी ने बहुत कुछ इस वेबिनार से सीखा होगा। एक बार फिर इस आयोजन को सफल बनाने के लिए आप सभी का धन्यवाद। किसी भी असुविधा को महसूस किया हो उसके लिए मैं क्षमा प्रार्थी हूं। स्वतंत्रता दिवस की आपको अग्रिम शुभकामनाएं और बधाई प्रेषित करता हूं। आप सभी का बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद।